Welcome back to part 2 of Afro Latinidad with Jenny and Jennifer. We took a short break because the episode ran longer than usual, so we decided to break it up into 2 separate episodes. But yeah, let's get right into it. Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing that. Like, if I come home being like, el casillero se cerró, my family's gonna be like, la laca, you mean? Like, what are you talking about? So, like, I personally didn't do that, but for the opposite reason, because I was like, I'm gonna get made fun of if I come home trying to act bougie.
So I would code switch for the relationship that I had with that person. With my teachers, I had like a borderline teacher's pet type of student where I had a very good relationship with my teachers. Literally just the fact that I could talk to my teacher as a regular person, and that kind of gave me some leverage in the classroom. When I would go to speak to a random adult, it would be very like, oh, how you doing? My name is Sandy, like a job interview type thing, like so that they could see me in a not, this is a little black kid that has an attitude type of way. And then with my black friends, I didn't have to like pretend to be hood, but there was kind of like this stigma, I guess, that you kind of had to be a little, had to be a little hood just so that you didn't get made fun of, or so that the white kids didn't think that you were white. And we all there was this low key, it's just a weird, it's a weird atmosphere in general. So, and then with my white friends, I was still myself, and I didn't realize this until I got to college, but I spoke to them in a very like proper way because that's how they spoke at home. But then they would look to me as like kind of the language relief, sort of like they would try to practice their slang on me, if that makes sense. So,
these are microaggressions.
Yeah, exactly.
I would just like to say, for those that are listening, that he put the word proper in air quotes, because personally, I think...
Yes, I was going to touch on that.
Yeah, there's a really big problem when we say proper.
Yeah, because it's not right or wrong. It's
exactly.
Just, but, so my code switching would be more to the relationship and not necessarily to what I was trying to get out of the person. It was more, I want them, like, sure, I want them to see me in a good light. It was more your comfort level. But yeah, it's more like I want them to be comfortable talking to me. And when I would, in Spanish, this is when I kind of had that experience in college, I got that vocabulary where I was able to switch from my campesino, that's what I was used to. That's how I talked to my mom in a way. And when I got to college, the vocabulary, I wasn't exposed to some high class, Latinos. Like they were, straight up from, humble beginnings type of dudes too. Some of them had a little bit more money, but they weren't a high class to for lack of a better word. So when I got to Dominican Republic, I was lucky enough to have some family members that were like from the city, and city Spanish in Dominican Republic is a lot more proper than campesino Spanish. So I kind of practiced.
So they think.
I got to practice with them, and I was like, oh, ¿cómo tú estás? Estamos hablando de negocio, estamos hablando de cosas profesionales, blah, blah, blah. And then I get to the campo and be like, hey, ¿qué lo que, hermano? And that way I was able to kind of practice code switching not only in English, but in Spanish too. And I've kind of developed the versatile part of it, but at the same time, I feel like I've sacrificed the regular voice that I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm losing, but it's turning into something else. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
So do you think, and I guess this question is for both of you, do you think that your vocabulary in one area or another has suffered because of code switching? Because, for example, for me, I took Spanish for business in college. And when I took that class, I learned a lot of words, but I also was very humbled by my teacher, because my teacher told me that I needed to practice my enunciation and the way that I said words, because Dominicans spoke really poor Spanish.
Yeah.
And then my aunt, her mom told me once.
Your aunt said that?
My aunt's mom. Yeah. She said that I was really pretty until I opened my mouth to speak Spanish. So
many feelings about all of this.
Yeah. So like I was very humbled in my language, because I knew a lot of words, but because I couldn't pronounce them in the way that others wanted to hear them, that felt like that was their dominant, I guess, arena of language. I felt like I was inadequate. So I felt like I had to stick to the words that I could properly pronounce and not try to expand outside of that in English or in Spanish. Because, like, for example, the other day I said a word and you were like, oh, you have to say it like this. You're saying it wrong. I will never use that word again because I feel like I can't say it properly.
You're like, and that's
espresso?
the end of that.
Espresso. I keep saying espresso.
You see, all of these things make me so upset. So much so that I forgot your original question. Because all I can think about is the fact that, like, I hate when people police not only blackness, but also, like, our language. Like, I think that, and it kind of goes back to what you were mentioning about, like, how do I explain what I'm trying to say? Like, like, our language and how we speak isn't related to our intelligence.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's the issue. Kind of even how you had to make the note that, like, when you say proper, you don't actually mean proper. It's just kind of how society views it. And I think that's the issue. Like, I feel that if anything, it's impressive to be so versatile and to be able to code switch and to be able to have the tools to perform in all of those spaces. I don't need to be 100%. I don't think any of us need to be 100% in each one of those avenues because it doesn't dictate our intelligence. Like, I know Dominicans who talk like, hey, yo, que lo que está pasando, who are very well-read and well-versed and are just able to move and like flow in that space.
And I feel like that's more useful too.
I agree. I think that it's more beneficial and I can connect with more people because of that, not in spite of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue, that people will hear your tone or hear the words that you use and automatically make assumptions about you.
Yeah.
And none of that is valid because you have no idea just because you hear me talking in slang what I actually know and don't know.
Yeah, and the key there, I think, is the ability to connect with as many people as possible. Because you speak with other people in your culture, but at the same time you go on like Netflix and you watch something in Spanish, it's Spain Spanish most of the time. And even then I kind of have been able to find an appreciation for Spain Spanish because it sounds kind of weird to us, but then when you see them in discourse with each other, it's the same exact vibe that we would have speaking to our own people.
It's just different dialect or a different way.
Exactly. It's just the environment, and there's a bunch of different reasons why language is the way that it is.
Now, I think it's even interesting the fact that, so me and you have the same mom and dad, we're raised in the same environment, but your vocabulary is a lot larger than mine.
That's like a school thing.
And, right. But then again, people will listen to you speak and they will automatically assume, like, speak in English, they will automatically assume that you're probably more educated than I am because of the language, because you use words like discourse. That is not a word.
So do you.
But like even then, like, people will listen to me and they listen, and for the most part I use the language that I feel comfortable with based on the environment that I'm in. But he uses words like discourse on the regular when he's talking to the general public.
But all of this is about, like, and I know you were mentioning, this is all about, like, what you consume, like the media that you consume, the literature that you consume, and what's around you. Because it has nothing to do with who is more educated or where you, like, that doesn't matter. I think it's just, like, what you get used to hearing and how people talk around you. Because if you are around people that's a regular, like, vocabulary word that they use, you're going to get the hint of that. But if you're around people who are like, what the heck is he talking about? You're not gonna use those type of words. Like, it just depends on what you're consuming.
To that, I would just say, if I was in an environment where you guys at your workplace, right, when you write an email and when you speak to people in a meeting, if I were to hop on that meeting or write that email, they'd be like, yo, who's this guy? Like, as far as if I were to like pretend to be you, necessarily, if I was trying to write an email for you, or maybe somehow I was able to speak for you, it would not at all be the vibe that the meeting is having. Because they'd be like, oh, because I'm very business casual when it comes to that kind of stuff. And she's very...
Business professional.
Yeah, business professional. So I think that in that setting, they'd be like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to handle himself in a meeting, right? When they'll see my sister and be like, oh, she's so good at speaking in a corporate office or in a corporate space because of what you were saying earlier, the things that you're exposed to and what you're used to. And what you consume on a regular basis.
You know what's so interesting about that is the structure of emails is really dictated by the generation. So, like, for example, when I was learning how to write emails, it was like when people were like using emails as a form of like casual.
It might as well have been a fax, like.
Yeah, like it was like that little laptop didn't exist. It was like big, bulky, like fat laptops. And I remember learning how to write an email, and it was like, to whom this may concern, or dear so and so. It was like you were writing a letter.
Yeah, it was a letter. It was an electronic
like,
letter.
Best wishes, and it was just this level of like,
I guess professionalism.
Not even like
only
or just formality. I don't even know.
Yeah, there was like, so when I started getting into the corporate space after college, and people started in the workplace sending me emails that didn't have a greeting and a salutation, I was like,
but I came from higher ed, and that's how students send emails.
Like, I was very confused. Like, when people didn't say, like, if you have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out. Or, like, should you have questions? Like, when there were, like, little things that I was taught were, like, if you don't put this in your email, you are not getting an email back. When I started seeing people do that, I was like, what?
No, I feel like I got bullied into sending like very proper emails, because when I was at Temple, I had a job there where, and this obviously it always comes back to like who you are and your race, but anything that I sent out was seen as like aggressive. Like, I promise you, every single email that I sent, somebody read it yelling. I don't know what it was, no matter how I formatted, no matter how many to whom it may concerns I put in there. Like, when I sent an email, my supervisor got a call saying like, Jenny is sending a very aggressive and sassy email, and I just got so anxious about like the words that I use, and that's why I use so many exclamation points now, and I'm always like, thank you so much. Like, I'm like super high pitched and peppy in emails because of that, because I don't want to be seen as unprofessional. And funny enough, another moment where I got bullied into like trying to be more professional, I was trying to get an externship when I was in my master's program, and if I would have got into this, and I was very qualified, I did very good in my interview, if I would have got in, they would have paid for my entire tuition. And I apparently got denied because I was not professional enough. Like, this is like told to me verbatim. That I was not professional enough. And the example that was given to me was that when I sent the emails out to the people that were managing the program, that I used only their first name, like, to greet them. Instead of like Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, that I just used their first name, and that just showed how unprofessional I was, right?
But if you were in the externship, they'd be like, oh, just call me.
But I think that that's just like another barrier and some red tape that's put around, because I'm sure that the person who ended up getting the role didn't have that, and also did find out that we got the job over me. So that's interesting. But I don't know. I feel like that's another issue, like trying to build barriers around professionalism, which in that moment I was still younger, and I was very frustrated, because I'm just like, first and foremost, y'all should be lucky I'm out here being this proper, and this proper once again, and this professional, because nobody in my family taught me this.
But
like, I didn't learn this anyway. I had to teach myself this.
But see, that then goes back to a level of, what does professionalism mean, right? Because we get into that topic. And so I've come from the corporate space, and I've come from the advertising space, which interjects in the corporate space. And you go into these environments, and for example, in a banking environment, you've got the suit and tie, and you've got all of this red tape, and you've got all of these chains of commands, and you have all of these like restrictions on the way that you can approach people, right? But then you go into the advertising industry, and people come with jeans to work, but that's not inappropriate.
But also, I think that because as people of color, we're not in the spaces to establish what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, that like we're not privy to that. So it's not up to us. Like, we're kind of like at the mercy of whoever decides it's professional and when they decide it's professional.
Yeah. And when you the thing that I've found interesting that's really actually helped me this whole past year, that there's this safe space where you can live when you're talking to somebody, especially if you're trying to, if it's a transaction, right? Even if it's a casual conversation, sometimes you're trying to get an opportunity, or maybe they're trying to get an opportunity. There's a safe space where you can be casual, but at the same time keep a professional atmosphere. And I think where, like, if you don't call them Mr. whatever in your email, you have to, like, you probably don't want to be in that space anyways.
No, for sure. And you learn that now.
You know, because it's like if a company realistically is asking you to be a certain way, it should be that way within the company. But most of the time, when somebody's asking you to call them Mr. or Mrs. something, once you actually get the opportunity and you get in there, you realize that nobody's actually like that. And then you're out here, like, you're putting on this facade and you're trying to be this thing that you're presenting yourself as, and nobody else is doing that. So I think there's kind of, you know, I've gotten a lot of experience with real people that are like, hey, you know, just we're having this conversation, we're having this interview, and obviously we have to keep a level of professionalism, but at the same time, we're two people having a conversation. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it is. So there, we kind of, like you said, we're not privy to that vibe growing up. So when we get there, it's kind of like we either overdo it, or since we're not educated on the situation, we don't know how to do it. And I guess getting that experience is how we kind of find the balance, but there's not a lot of that going around for our category.
Yeah, I would say I would say, I wouldn't say there's not a lot of it going around for our category. I would just say there's not enough people that look like us giving the education to people that look like us.
That's what I mean.
Because, for example, the advice that I got growing up was about professionalism as it related to companies that had all of this red tape and were very, like, by the book. And then I got into an industry that was a total opposite of that, and I ended up finding a weird balance in between, where I realized that if I couldn't be accepted in the way that I came in, that wasn't an environment I wanted to be in. But that took a lot of falling down. That took a lot of me walking into spaces thinking I had to be a certain way, and then looking at people that were getting paid more than me, who were doing less than me, who were acting way less professional than I was, and realizing that my choices in employer matter just as much as their choices in employee.
Oh, absolutely. But we didn't feel like we had that choice. Like, I just don't feel like we felt like we could make those decisions, because a lot of the time we're, especially in our environment, and I don't know if you guys felt the same with your upbringing, but like, you kind of feel like anything that you get, you have to be grateful for. Like, that's why a lot of times, like, we take the first offer we get, we take the first job, we do whatever. Like, they ask us to do something that's like outside of our boundaries, we're gonna go anyways because we could get fired at any moment. And like, God forbid, I think it's the same reason why sometimes people that are in those positions, the few of us that are in those positions, don't always extend the hand or try to teach or try to give back, because we're like,
we have that
if
fear.
you're just like, if I do that, then you gonna come and take my job? I don't think so.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of that and a lot of imposter syndrome going around.
It's
but
it's kind of the poverty mentality of not having enough. You know, you never had anything, so once you get something, you feel like you're gonna lose it right away. And we spoke about this before, about how our culture, when we in America, we work really hard, and the way I like to say it is that sometimes we work harder rather than smarter.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You know, like, you have a lot of Latinos and Hispanics in the workforce that could be either getting paid way more or could be doing a lot less for the money that they're getting, and simply because we have that mentality of whatever we get is what we get. You know, like, I'll accept this because I'm doing a job, or I'll do this because I'm getting paid for it, rather than actually weighing the pros and cons, comparing it to other people's experiences. We just kind of accept it as it comes to us. So I guess is kind of what you're speaking to, in that way, where we're just like so used to counting our blessings that sometimes we don't take the opportunities that we could be.
Yeah, and I would say that also goes to, like, setting boundaries. So, like, for me, for example, I'm a night owl. So I'm the kind of person that does a lot of my best work at night, because there's no distractions, there's no interruptions. I can, like, fully focus. Now, I realized that over time I would be working really late hours, and people expected me to answer their emails at that late hour, because in their mind, that was not a boundary that existed. It's like, if I send Jen an email at 6:00, she's going to answer it. And I started getting stressed out because I was no longer working at my best, because that was the time that I worked best. I was working at a necessary time to suit somebody else's needs.
But if you were to email them at 6:00, you wouldn't get a response till the next day.
Right, exactly. So what I started doing was I started working at night, and I started scheduling my emails so that they went out at the times that were work hours or right before work hours. So I started drafting my emails at 12 o'clock at night, 1 in the morning, but they would be scheduled to send at 7:30, 8 o'clock. I might still be in bed. I might be on my way to work.
You don't know what I'm doing.
You don't know what I'm doing. But you know that I did the work.
Yeah.
The work got done. And the work got done in the time it needed to get done. But I worked within the parameters that I was comfortable with, and I could do my best work. Now, granted, that doesn't work for everything. There are times that you actually, like, for example, there are times that my boss will ask me for something at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I know that it's important because he needs it for something that he needs to turn in, and he just hasn't gotten the time to come to me. There's a level of, okay, I can set this boundary, and there's a level of, you actually are counting on me right now.
Yeah.
So I think that was a line that I didn't understand. I always thought that I had to be at everybody's beck and call if they were above me because of that fear of, like, I'm going to lose my job. And then I slowly started realizing, do you actually need this, or do you just want this because it's convenient for you? And had to kind of find the line between there so that I was being effective, but I also wasn't, like, not being reliable.
But you have to realize that like need to, like, perform and need to please, and that feeling comes from, like, us kind of, how do I explain, like, us, I guess, reenacting our parents' experiences. At least for me, it was definitely reenacting my parents' experiences. Like, they had less opportunities and had to kind of be at the beck and call of their situation. And because that's what you see, even though you have more resources, even though you're more skilled and, like, or have more of an educational background, you still act the same way because that's what you grew up seeing. Yeah. You grew up seeing them having to do whatever was put in their plate in order to put food on the table. So we kind of, like, inherited that, like, desperation and that lack of boundaries from our parents. Like, even though we may have not really been in that situation or had those restrictions, we still act the same way. Like, a lot of us do.
But you know what's funny is that translates beyond the workplace.
Oh,
that
for sure.
translates into relationships, friendships. I remember keeping friends around and keeping significant others around in my life that I felt like I couldn't do any better, or like there was something that I was doing wrong, or I needed to do better in order for them. Like, it was always, I was the problem because there was not, or I didn't have enough of something. So I just always kind of, like, conformed to what was put in front of me because that was all I had. Right. And it goes back to that same ideology of you kind of settle into what's there because that's what's there. And our parents taught us that that's what's there, so that's what you gotta take.
Or you're sticking around with them just to cumplir, because I know that's, like, the biggest Dominican, like, headache of life. Cumpliendo with people. No matter what you do.
You do it just to do it.
Yeah, like, you do it so that people don't say, so that people see, so that, like, it doesn't come off this way. Like, I'm convinced, and hopefully this is not all Dominicans, but I'm convinced that it's such a thing in our culture to, like, live for other people and for other people's perception of us.
That's why Dominicans stay in jobs for so long.
But this is another point that was touched on before, was the difference of being Dominican in this country and Dominican in the Dominican Republic. Like, our sense of community does not work the same in America.
At all.
You know, because there's not the same, like, lax lifestyle. In DR, you could, you know, the day in DR just seems way longer than in America, you know? And people that have been in this country and have been in the Dominican Republic can vouch for this. But when in America, you don't have people asking for sugar anymore. Like, your neighbor doesn't come up to your door asking for sugar. Your neighbor doesn't pull up to your crib.
Because when your neighbor pulls up, you're like, what you need?
Why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. And nobody ever pulls up unannounced here. Like,
for sure.
You're sending a calendar invite, or you're sending a text.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not gonna lie. Send people calendar invites now.
When you go to DR, you pull up to someone's crib and they serve you coffee.
Yeah, and low key, if you send a calendar invite there, it'll probably be rude.
Yeah,
And honestly, you're like, I have to invite you? Like, that's offensive. Yeah. Like, why would I need to do all that? We cool, we family.
Exactly.
Also, and to that point, in DR, when you set an appointment with somebody, if you don't show up, there is not this here.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like,
disrespectful. Something came up.
Yeah, like if you said like, "Oh, I can't make it today," you probably would have low key felt a type of way. Even if like something happened on the road and she just couldn't, you would have felt a type of way. In DR, it would have been like, yo lo veo en la sirena.
Yeah,
or like I see him around sometime. Like there's just this level of like mixed culture there because you showed up really late and there was no like, why are you late?
Yeah.
And there was definitely some coffee here.
Yeah. Yeah, there has to be. But, you know, when we were having the meeting about this, you mentioned that people are always, from our culture, are always asking for a favor without that compensation, you know, like the free favor. Because, like, again, it works in Dominican Republic because you're always seeing each other. So it's always going to be compensated. It's always going to be repaid, even if it's unintentionally. But here, you can go so long without seeing somebody that lives right next to you. So that favor becomes a little less convenient, and it becomes a little more selfish.
Yeah, but also, like, I feel that in Dominican Republic, or a lot of countries like that, it's way more of a community vibe.
Yeah,
like, I'm not doing you a favor because you need a favor. I'm doing you a favor because one day you're going to look out for me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing you a favor because I look out for your kid. You look out for my kid. When I'm not around, like, you looking at my house. You making sure nobody's coming. You going to let me know if something happens in the block. Like, it's that kind of feel, and that's okay. Whereas, like, here, it's very individualistic.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the case at all. Like, if I'm doing you a favor, what's my return? When am I getting that back? Like, no, for real, it's a lot different. Like, anything that I'm doing for you seems like something I'm taking away from me. Here, I feel like that's definitely the American kind of mindset. Is very like give and take and very transactional. And I think that it becomes problematic when like we try to mix those worlds, excuse me, and we're kind of like, I want to have like be in community, but I don't want to get taken advantage of, and I want to give, but like it's just not the same concept, and you don't know how to approach it. Like, it's kind of like when you don't know whether to give somebody a hug or a handshake or a kiss on the cheek.
There's sometimes where you kind of both agree on something, but at the same time we run into that problem of community where people want to be a community, but since we're in this environment of give and take, and you know, what do I get for that, you know, quid pro quo, it's hard to gauge that because there's not one definitional way to do it.
I think to that specific point, there's a level of just awareness that you have to have also in your environments, because I think there are times where people give and they, like, for example, me, I'm a very like give kind of person, and at some point in time I had to realize you can't always give without expecting to receive at some point. And I think here in America, that balance of always giving and wanting to receive became almost like a foundational piece of giving, and versus in DR, it was you just give and they like
something will come back.
Yeah, like something will come back.
That's what my mom says. My mom is always like, you have to be like that with people because of the universe. Like, God is gonna repay it no matter what. Like, you don't have to worry about them doing something for you. Like, God will handle it. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think for me, being Dominican and feeling like I could just give was cool. But
until it wasn't.
until it wasn't, because the culture here is not like that. And the people that are here, that are raised in an American environment, are very much like, oh, you're going to keep giving to me and I don't have to do anything? Well, I'm going to keep
I'm just going to keep reeling that in.
Right, which is what we run into in the professional space, where Latinos who are used to, I'm going to just give and give and give, never expecting anything back because the universe
get burnt out.
You get burnt out. And that's the reality of the human nature, is you can give as much as you want, but your perspective and your mentality has to be healthy to be able to do that and not feel that burnout in a culture that expects that give and take.
I think you should be able to give whatever you can without giving away yourself. You know, if you have the capacity to give in a manner that is not detrimental to your own situation, then go ahead. You know, but if you get into that give until, you know, you have nothing, then that's not the.
But I feel like
move.
as Dominican Americans, we're the only ones that have like the privilege of thinking about that or trying to like find that balance, because I feel like for Dominicans, or at least in my experience, it's just a lifestyle. Like, it's not even like I have to find the balance to see what works. Like, my boyfriend's mom, God bless her heart, she is such a giving person, and I sometimes feel guilty. I'm like, yo, am I rude? Like, do I have a problem? Because like, if I go and take her something, she's like, but I have to give to everybody else. Like, if I go and bring her anything, she's like, I need to make sure that I put some aside to take to my cousin, to take to my brother tomorrow. Like, with anything, like, she would be like, did you bring for everyone else that's here with us today? And I think that's so sweet. But I'm just like, I see you doing that, and obviously as a Dominican American, when I see that, I'm like, girl, like, why would we do that? Like, those people do not care. Like, those people are not thinking about you like that. If they got that in the back, they're not gonna bring it to you. But she doesn't consider that, and she doesn't care. Like, she's just like, that means nothing to me whether they want to or not. Like, I'm right with the world. Like, I'm gonna do that.
And I was gonna say, there's a level of religion to that too, because Dominicans are very religious by culture, not even by like spirituality, but by culture. Because even in the Bible and like in Catholicism, Christianity, Judaism, you give everything you got, even if you're left with nothing at the end of the day, because God is gonna bless you. So there's also that level of tradition in that religious sense, that Dominicans come to this country, and if one of them comes to this country and lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, their 25 cousins that come after them will live in that apartment until they've been able to get on their feet, and they will split that one slice of bread until everybody's gotten their little crumb.
And let me tell you, you're gonna have to complete with those people for the rest of your life. Because no, my dad is like that. My dad is like, there's people that have like, he has experienced those type of things with, that he's like, I could never say no to them. If they ask me for anything, I have to say yes, because we've experienced that together. And I just think that's so interesting, because we have that need and that culture to have to like always, I don't know, like look out for each other, be generous, which is great and fantastic, but doesn't translate here same.
That was gonna be my point earlier, is that we have and of course there's so many different cultures and things that probably can resonate with this, but I know for a fact that Eastern culture generally is like that as well. It's very what's best for the group, what's best for the community, and that is that kind of give to your neighbor, and eventually somebody's gonna bring it around and give it to you. And the Western culture is very be on your own, stuff, get yours and get out of there. And you can, and it's not necessarily a good or bad thing either way, but when you try to do too much of one thing, especially when you try to have that communal vibe in a very individualistic setting, it doesn't work. The same thing would happen vice versa. If you try to be extremely individual in a very communal setting, you're going to not do very well in that atmosphere.
Do you think that has something, and this is just a weird thought that just dawned on me, and you would probably have to do a lot of research to like really figure it out, but do you think it has to do with colonialism? Because if you look at colonialism and look at the different
encyclopedia
countries,
over here.
No, like, okay, so think about like the Caribbean islands, a lot of the Latino, like Latin America, and the way that we view community versus the United States and Canada, which is very individualized. And so when you think about the Latinx and Caribbean countries, you think about the way that they were founded. Yes, they were colonized, but a lot of the people that inhabit those spaces are people of African descent, are people of indigenous descent, are people that were founded in communities that were built on we gotta stick together.
We
gotta stick together in order to survive. They came in and they were like, we came to escape those people that were trying to oppress us, and if y'all get in our way, y'all getting your head cut off.
Follow the plan and keep your head down.
And it's kind of survive where you can for them. For I guess the community, more of the community setting, it's survive where you are. And then the colonialism is more go where you can survive.
Absolutely.
So when you get there, like they work so hard, because you got to see it from their perspective. When you work so hard to get away from whatever you're running from, wherever you go, like, sorry.
You're trying to do your thing.
Because if you think
but that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like think about the settlements, how like they colonized the East, right? The East Coast, and then as they moved west, it was like they were taking what they could take and they didn't really care what it cost them. They were like, what I know is that I'm not going
But even
back.
to rebuttal that, if we're talking America specifically, the further west you go, kind of like the less they care.
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
Because I think you got those
That's
like
true.
those colonizers at the end of the line that were like, you know, I guess, you know, like these people were like
Whatever works.
Yeah, and there was
But,
less
like-
people too. Like as we moved west, there was less people moving west.
Right.
It's interesting because I just feel like as Dominican Americans or just like Latinx, like we are intertwined in all of this. Like all of it is just based, like our entire route is just based off intersectionality, and we get to see a little bit of it all and experience a little bit of it all. And like it's kind of like we were talking about when we went to school. Like we don't fit in any of those boxes. Like we're not super generous. We're not super individualistic. Like we don't know. And I feel like in either one of those spaces, like I don't know if you guys have this, and this is a different topic. I apologize, but I don't know if you guys have this at home where I personally feel like I don't give enough. Like I know my parents came, and if my dad is making $10, he's sending $5 to my grandma, no matter what. Like it has to, no matter how much money he's making, he has to send a percentage over there. And my family in Dominican Republic is like, y lo cuarto, like you send, like you working, send some money. And I'm just like, I don't have that custom in America. People usually like set their kids up, and then the kid just does their thing and worries about
kid does their thing.
and worries about becoming, you know, financially free. And then like later I got you, but like right now I can't really give you half of what I got. It's not enough. But they don't think that way because they're like, no, like here you have to, like that's the expectation. So even if I do send like, or I try to like give a little bit here and there, is not the same as like what my parents are doing. It's not the same at all. So I don't know if you guys have that experience.
Sure. My mom literally, she's one of 6 kids, I think, and she has all brothers. She's the youngest, but she's also the only girl. So she grew up taking care of all of them basically though.
That's how my mom is too.
So now that she's the one that ended up in the better position, she's still doing the same thing. They have, obviously, they're individuals. Some of them do their own thing. Some of them are a little more dependent. But at the end of the day, no matter what anyone's position is, she's always the one giving to them.
That's exactly the role that my parents play.
My dad is the one that kind of got out the trenches too. Even though his siblings are not all, they're like in pretty good situations. He's the one that's usually giving a little bit more because he's in the better position. So it's kind of, you know, if we're going to make this political, it's kind of like a socialism that's built into the family dynamic.
Absolutely.
Where the person that's doing the best is also giving the most.
But
yes.
Even
and it's expected to. It's not because it's from their hearts, because they have to cumplir.
Yeah.
But you know what's funny is even then, if you look at my parents, my mom's family is very much like traditional Dominican. And my dad's family has been in this country for so long that they're very American in their way of thinking. They're very much individualized because they've set their own foundations. Like, they're really like, it's about me first, and then I got y'all. But then again, with them, they came to this country
to do that.
So it's like they didn't, like, I also think it's how you come to the country too, and the way that you establish. Because, like, they are very much like, I'm going to set me up, and then I got y'all, but they're like that with everything, including their kids. Versus my dad, for example, like when we got into this apartment, I was like, I told my dad that I was looking to rent a place, and I was like, I don't have the full like 3 months of rent that I need to give as a deposit. He was like, how much is it? I'll front you, you pay me back later. Now, taking a loan from my dad is very much like, I got you when you retire, and I gotta take care of you. Like, that's just,
I'm a keep that. Don't worry. Like, I got you later. Like,
like that's just how me and my dad work. Like, our financial relationship is very much based on, I'm going to set you up. You're very much independent, and I'm going to set you up to continue to be independent, because I know that once you're independent, the rest is gonna follow.
But you got to think about the fact that he's probably doing that for the same reason my dad, because I have a similar issue with my dad, and it's because that was not the case for him. So he's like, I'm trying to do something a little different because my dad was sent here to help everybody else. Yeah. Like, they were like, you go over there and you make money and you send it back. Thanks. Like, that was his sole purpose. Yeah. Like, that was the expectation from the beginning. So I'm sure our parents are like, all right, I have to do this, but I want y'all to, like...
worry about your own thing.
Yeah. Like, daddy... Like, my dad jokes
But even though they do that, I still feel the pressure to have to give back.
Right, exactly. Like, I pay my dad back,
can't be that
but it's like...
Yeah.
Like, I pay him back, and, like, sometimes he'll call me and he'll be like, hey, I ain't got no money in my account, so
Slide that.
what you got? And I'm like, this is what I got, Dad. Like, this is all I got. We gonna have to make this work. And other times, like, I'll get paid. Like, right now, living here, I pay all the bills, but, like, I always send him a little extra to pay the mortgage because I'm like, you know, I owe you a lot. Like, there's no amount of money in the world that is going to pay for what my parents have done. Even if my dad were to take all of the money that he's ever let me borrow and then discounted the money that I've let him borrow, that still wouldn't amount to the debt that I have because of the type of parents that we have. Like, when you have parents that are willing to put your needs first and make sure that your future is set, there's no amount of money that can pay for that.
I agree. Do you feel like that's the reason why we're all as motivated as we are?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm not letting that go to waste.
Yeah. Because they also had like those little microaggressions growing up where they were like, you know, I'm not paying for nothing. You know, I'm not my dad, especially with
absolutely.
When I was getting into certain endeavors and my dad would have to pay, he'd be like, psh, I better see something.
Yeah. Yo, that poor little violin. Yo, every time my dad sees that violin, it's sitting over there in the corner. I brought it here because every time he would say it, he would look at it. He would make a comment about how much money he spent on that violin.
Yeah.
And how I never became like the next.
Listen, you see, that is actually the reason why I didn't even have any hobbies growing up. Because I tried to play basketball and my dad was like, you better not mess up these sneakers and my money if you're not finna become a part of the WNBA. And I was like, no, I'm good off that. Like, I'm not even gonna waste your bread.
You know what? I don't even like basketball.
Exactly. Like, he was like, I can't bring you here every day and invest if you're not about to be the greatest. And I was like,
you know what's funny is, do you think that translates to you? And said, you know, that's funny a lot of times in this conversation. But do you think that translates to your... Because, like, we were talking about this earlier, how we only do things that we know we're good at.
Absolutely.
And, like, we stray away from the things that we know we're, like, not the greatest. Like, we may try it, but, like, if we're not the greatest, we're like, you know.
Yes, because opportunity cost hurts me. Like, hurts me bad because that's how I grew up. My dad was like, yo, you don't have time to waste. Not time, not money. Money is time. Like, you have to make sure that whatever you're doing, like, there's going to be a return. Yeah. Like, and that's, I think, why it's hard for me to even have a hobby that is just something that I enjoy. And I think a lot of people, like, a lot of millennials especially are like, what is a hobby? Because, like, I started during quarantine, I started, like, trying to, like, write letters and, like, do little stamps and, like, make, like, homemade birthday cards. And my mom was like, you going to make a negocio? Like, you going to make that a business? Like, how we going to monetize this little activity you got going on? And I'm like, I cannot just do something without being like, how can I make this as effective and as profitable as possible? And I just think that is the mindset with everything that we do, that our parents are like, how you gonna like flip that?
See, I think my experience is actually a little different from that, actually, because this also goes back to the relationship I had with my teachers. I would have that personal relationship in the classroom where if I had a good relationship with my teacher and I didn't get a good test a good score on my test, I would be, you know, the next assignment would be fire, or my paper would be fire. I had to find an alternative to whatever I fell short in, and because of that, I was able to really find I guess the difference between our situations is that I don't feel that opportunity cost pressure because I feel like I'm going to get it back another way.
That's interesting. And I wonder if, like, being, like, the oldest has anything to do with that. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking about that because I don't feel that way at all. Like, I feel like I love psychology in high school. Like, I was obsessed. I honestly wanted to double major and, like, do psychology in college. And I took an AP psychology course. And I thought I was doing great. And I definitely failed. Like, I definitely did not pass the AP test. And I was done. Like, I was, like, there was no, like, any time that I, like, failed at something, I was like, I'm good off that. Next. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to try on the next one really hard. It was like, that's not my thing. We don't have time to try to perfect this. If I'm not naturally good at this, we got to move on to the next thing on the list.
AP's a setup.
But no, I was done. Like, there was a lot of things in my life that were like that. Same thing, like, with basketball. Same thing with anything that I picked up. I was like, volleyball. I tried a lot of things. If I wasn't good,
it was the next
that's it. I was like, I'm good off this. Like,
you know what's so interesting is I had a weird in-between experience where, like, I very much only tried things that I knew I was good at. But, like, the problem was that if I tried something and I failed, I had to prove to you that I could do it. So like if God forbid I did something that I thought I could succeed at and I failed, there was no turning back. Like I was going to do it because so this goes back to a bike story. I always tell this story. My dad bought me a bike and it had training wheels. And I rode it with training wheels, and then all of my other friends on the block got their training wheels taken off. And I really wanted my training wheels off. And my dad was like, I don't think that you're ready. He kept telling me, like...
Those were the magic words.
He was, God forbid.
Yeah, like, he kept trying to tell me that, like, I didn't have enough practice on the bike, and I really wanted the training wheels off my bike. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he took the training wheels off my bike. Didn't take a lot of convincing. He was like, tú quieres seguir. Tú vas a coger. So he taught me a little bit, worst. And then I fell off my bike. Aww. And he told me that I could not go back inside until I learned how to ride my bike. You best believe I learned how to ride that bike. Because I wanted him to put the training wheels back on. He was like, that's not how that works.
I never heard that story.
You haven't heard this story? I tell the story all the time. And so that is how I learned. Actually, there is a picture of Daddy sitting reading a book and you on Mommy's lap and us sitting in front of the house where this happened. We used to live on a military base. And I remember why this story very vividly because he told me that this is like my first it builds character lesson for my dad. And he was like, no, you're going to learn. And I learned how to ride the bike. And after that, it was like, if you're going to try something, you're going to put in your full effort. And if you putting in all you got still fails, then it's just not for you. But, like, at least you learned something.
That's interesting. I don't know. I just feel like I grew up with, like, a natural finesse. And if I couldn't naturally finesse it, I was like, it's not for me. Yeah. Like, and I feel like my defense mechanism, like, I would have that energy for something that I really wanted to learn. But not because, like, anybody told me that I couldn't. Because I feel like when people told me that I couldn't, like, my defense mechanism leads me to be like, and I don't care. So, now what? Like,
nah. If you told me I couldn't, I wanted to prove you wrong.
I'm also from the Bronx, so I was just very aggressive.
See, no, I was aggressive in the opposite way. I wanted to prove to you that I could. If you told me I couldn't, I'd be like, oh, word? Bet.
That, you see, is the difference. I feel like for me, it came from when you're little and people make fun of you and they're like, tell them that you don't care and the bully's going to feel stupid. Yeah. That was my approach to everything.
No, but that's like a Bronx thing too, though. So that's like physically where you grew up.
Yeah.
Where it's like if they fail at something, they're
like, so what's up? Like, it don't matter
care anymore. I wasn't even trying to do that.
Exactly. That wasn't even the goal anyway. So what are you talking about?
Exactly.
That's actually my approach to life.
It's funny because it's very much like, oh, you want me to climb a tree, but I'm a fish. So what? Like,
I'm very forward about that. Like, if I'm good at it naturally, I'm all for it. I'm extra competitive, like I mentioned. Like, I'll go hard, but if it's just not my thing, I'm like, we're not gonna talk about that today. Next.
I guess for me that attributes to when I was younger. I was never, not that I was never naturally good at anything, but I didn't know what I was naturally good at.
Okay.
Because the only thing I was naturally good at that I can remember is playing with toys and baseball. So
which is still playing with toys.
Yeah. It's just playing. Mm-hmm. So physically playing was like the only thing that I consciously knew that I was good at. So then when it came to other things, I had to figure out how to do it. Because for me, you gotta complete this task in whatever way you can complete it. So when I came across other hobbies or I got really good at skipping rocks at one age. Cause I was with a group of friends and we were skipping rocks.
That's how y'all know y'all grew up somewhere different. I'm like, what rocks was I skipping anywhere near New York City? Like,
there was this.
In what pond was I doing that?
I was with a group of people and we were by a body of water and we were throwing rocks, right? And I had never skipped a rock. I had never in my entire life even knew. Skill. I didn't even know rocks could walk on the water like Jesus. But they were throwing it and I was really bad at it. So I had already gotten into that mentality of figure it out. So for the next couple of months, I would literally collect rocks from the ground wherever I was. If there was a rock that could be skipped, I picked it up, I took it home, and then I would go to
y'all are persistent.
Yes. And then I would just look for an opportunity to skip rocks. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, yo, y'all going to the pond? Oh, we're going to some sort of body of water. I would bring a bag of rocks and I would skip them joints. until I got really good, and then it didn't matter anymore because nobody was skipping rocks. but
this is the reason why I don't put that much effort into anything.
But that's what I did with everything. Like, it was just.
But that's a good skill, though.
Then one day he's gonna come across some people that want to skip rocks.
And he's gonna have that talent in his pocket.
It does pay off sometimes, you know. So it pays off. There's some things that I picked up that I've been able to use.
Yeah, I think that's for me, like, one of the things that has always kind of got me to that level of, like, I should really try because eventually I may need this. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, one of the things that I have gotten really good at is remembering really unnecessary facts. Like, I'll be sitting in a conversation and be like, yo, did you know?
I did not grow up like that.
Fun fact. Like, and then people are like, wow, how do you know? I'm like, I genuinely don't know where I remember that from.
I get a lot of why do you know that?
Yeah, I get that too. Yeah. And then it's funny because I got to question myself sometimes. Like, when I come out with these fun facts, because sometimes it's word vomit. And I'll just say it. And then I'll be like, wait, is that true? Did I make that up? And then I'll go Google it and I'm like, no, I was right.
It's just nuts how much we are like our parents. No matter what we do, we end up like literally just becoming them in another freaking body. Because I feel like I also like am similar to my dad or in the same way as him, but he's more of like a people person. Like, you know how you're like, I don't know how you're so social or how like you're so all over the place. Like, that's my dad's thing. Like, he is like telling stories, making jokes, all the pizzazz, and like that's what I do. But girl, them facts, I don't know about that.
So we're pretty far into this conversation. And we got
have veered a little bit.
Yeah, we got it, but I think we're gonna be able to find a conclusion here.
Okay.
I just wanted some last remarks, you know, for the people. What is it that you want to leave them with? And to remind you, since we got off topic, we are talking about Afro Latinidad, you know, Black Latinidad, just being from our culture in this environment that we call America.
So in terms of what to leave people with, I think on that topic especially, the most important thing is educating yourself and going forward and doing the research and like learning from other people and having conversations like this to see that even though we're all like Afro-Latino and we're all Dominican American, we also have completely different perspectives. Even you two who grew up in the same household, completely different perspectives. And I think that if we move forward and don't make assumptions about people and about their experience and their level of education based on what they look like, what they sound like, we would live in such a better world. But also like we would be, no, seriously, but also we would be able to, I guess, like just embrace the beauty of it all and how awesome it is to be able to speak multiple languages, to be able to flex in different environments and be able to code switch, to be able to speak different dialects and switch class sets and all that kind of stuff. Like, that is awesome. And people think that it's a downfall. Facts. Yeah, people think that it's bad. People think that if they hear you speak in Spanish that you should not because you need to speak English because we're in America. Like, don't get mad at us because we know multiple languages. You know what I mean? Like, that's dope. And if you want to, like, don't be upset. And if you want to learn, let's talk about it. If you want to learn, pick up a book. Like, pick up a class. So I think that if we start embracing the differences and stop trying to, like, box things, we would just be in such a better place. So that's definitely, I think, the most important, like embracing and educating all of that.
Yeah, I would say to that point too is being open and willing to accept different perspectives, because sometimes we are, oh yeah, like I'm all for diversity, I'm all for these things, but when somebody tells you something that doesn't align with what you had in your mind, you instantly box them out or like cancel them.
That's a selective hearing.
Yeah, like cancel culture is such a big thing that it just does not sit well with me. I'm all for, like, if something doesn't sit well with you, you don't have to engage with it, but you also don't need to disrespect it. And I think there's a level of accountability that we all have to have for the hypocrisy that we all carry. We all have to be self-aware. I think that's one of the biggest pieces, is being self-aware, being willing to open and accept other perspectives, not necessarily agreeing with them. We can agree to disagree, but being open and willing to understand where somebody else is coming from. And I also think a big piece of it is advocacy. Advocating for other people and advocating for yourself and understanding that who you are is valuable. What you have to say and what you have to bring to the table is valuable, and understand that we might not all be sitting at the same table. And that's okay.
But we still eating though.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Like, we don't all have to sit at the same table. Just like in school, we had our individual desks, but we all came for the same purpose. And we all had our own individual way of learning. So if everybody is willing to accept that they're not going to align with everybody, there's an easier way to have a conversation where we're listening to each other and not trying to speak at each other. So I think a really big important piece about diversity and just identity in general, and having a conversation about identity, and to Jenny's point, educating yourself, is being willing to humble yourself and know that your perspective is not the only acceptable perspective.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to follow that up, y'all. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take out of this. But for me, I would just say know where you come from. You know, a lot of us are really good at forgetting our roots, and, you know, when it's convenient, of course. And going back to our whole, you know, anti-blackness in the Dominican culture, we have to understand where that comes from. You know, Rafael Trujillo. I made a video about this during the Black Lives Matter rallies, like during the heat of it, about limpiando la raza, you know, la rubia, la morena, y prieto. Like that, like those are some strong words that we don't really know the deepness behind what some of those meanings. So yeah, you know, just kind of before you get on your high and mighty chair, before you bring yourself down, because some of us, you know, forgetting where you come from can also mean, you know, forgetting that platform that you already have, forgetting that experience that is so valuable to what you bring to the table. So that that goes both ways. Just kind of check yourself before you wreck yourself, you know.
But in the words of Mufasa, remember who you are.
All right, well, you know, thank you for watching another episode of The Sandbar. I'm sure a lot of people are going to feel strongly about some of the things we said, so leave a comment. You know, if you have questions, hit us up. I'm going to plug Jennifer and Jenny again in the description below, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.